Hey guys, welcome back. This is Mystic Games. Today I want to talk about Cenarion minis. A lot of people are very upset in the Rumble right now with just content in general and then the lackluster party that is Cenarion. Pretty much the only minis that, Cenarions really have that are, would be considered, I would say, good would be the Ancient of War and Cenarius himself, really. Uno's okay, he has a couple strategies. The Moonkin is just horrible. The Fairy Dragon is pretty much useful for the resistance trait, and that's it. Plus it can see stealth, which is okay. And then you have the Dryad, who I already released a video on how they could fix the Dryad, or at least my thoughts on the Dryad. That being said, what is, right? It looks like we're getting Ysara soon. That looks like our next mini. It's probably going to be another leader for the Cenarion faction. So what are my thoughts beyond that? They still have a couple unit slots. We have like 3 or 4 unit slots they need to catch up to the other factions. Therefore, the background and paint that I made. Look at that skill. My super editing abilities have allowed me to use paint and text boxes to create this beautiful picture for you guys to explain my my idea. So what I'm thinking is they don't really have any low-cost minis. The only low-cost mini you really get that would be considered like close to a cycle mini would be the Ancient of War. The issue with the Ancient of War is it increases in cost as gold goes up, so if you want to drop it as like a cycle mini, you gotta drop it quickly and you gotta drop it low. So you kind of need to know what you're doing before you're even considering dropping them. Normally I use the Ancient of War because the minis are generally pretty bad as a cycle mini. Which he is pretty decent at because he is armored. I do want to mention that. So he does take a few hits, like for the gold that he costs. He's a good little shield to send out in a direction just to get through my my cycle and to have something that can block a couple hits. So I'm thinking Druid of the Talon and Druid of the Claw are the most likely candidates to see. We already have 2 bosses in the game that turn into essentially Druid of the Claw and Druid of the Talon. So my thoughts on what they could do to make them work and how they would fit into the roster. So we're going to start with Druid of the Talon because I think that one's the most unique. You make that a cycle mini, you make it cost 2. You guys can see I wrote that on there. I haven't really thought about the talents, but I'd probably do a talent for each form, and then probably like a generic talent that kind of affects both, but it's probably not as good as either of the other ones for a specific form. So when he's Druid of the Talon and he's not in his crow form, he would hit both air and ground, just like in Warcraft 3, if you guys have played that. You would give him like a passive Fairy Fire effect. I'm not sure how you would make that work. For like the Raider, getting rid of armor is like a permanent talent that you can pick. So if you're going to do something to reduce armor, what I would probably do is make Druids of the Talon have a spell that they target a armored unit and it loses its armor for 2 seconds. And they cast it like every 4 seconds or something. So there'd be like a gap, they'd cast it, the armor would go away, you get a couple hits in, and then the armor comes back, and then it gets its cast back. Maybe 3 seconds, so they get like a second of having their armor back, and then whatever. I'm not a game dev. I'm not going to talk about exacts, but pretty much my thought process is that would be kind of like its passive. In between attacks, it would debuff armor. Or you could just make its attack do the debuff, but then you'd have to slow down the attack. In Stormcrow form, it would be a low-cost air mini. It should have good range on it. It would probably be a single target, similar to Warcraft 3, where it would hit other air units and deal damage. It would probably be able to take out, like, if you send Harpies at it, would probably be able to beat 2 of the 3 Harpies. It would be kind of the power balance you'd want for the same level, because it's such a low-cost mini. And then, against, like, a Dragon or a Chimera one-on-one, it should be pretty close to beating it, if not beating it. And I say that in the sense because it would only hit air in that form, and therefore it would be useless otherwise, and there's ways just with that alone to balance the mini. It also gives you another reason to alternate and actually have units in your deck that alternate and have usage on both sides. So if you send it as an air unit, it only hits air, but it's going to be very strong for the cost, being able to take air out. And then you have the ground version, which will be good at reducing potentially armor or resistance. You could pick either or. And then you would hit both, but he would be weaker than his air counterpart for, like, air. I'd probably make him, you know, a little bit, probably on, like, the Witch Doctor scale, where he doesn't do a ton of damage, but he can, you know, he does a decent amount. And then you would go into talents with him. I think one talent you could do is the Stormcrow that's a boss in the match that you fight him in. He does like an AoE lightning thing. You could do a talent like that where the Stormcrow now fires lightning instead, does an AoE strike against air, lowers the range maybe, but it does AoE damage instead. And then you would have, like, in normal form, he does Cyclone in the game. I don't think you could really do a Cyclone. But you could maybe even just do a basic Entangling Roots or something, like he does, like an Entangling Roots ability on a target or something, and holds it in place, along with his, you know, Fairy Fire ability. And then something that affects both forms. I'm not sure what that would be. But that would make the most sense for them to do, because they already kind of have it in-game. And I think it would work. They would just have to figure out the talents and make it actually a decent mini, so we can get some good Cenarion minis. Next is Druid of the Claw. So what I would do with Druid of the Claw is I'd give him Rejuvenate, because that's what he does in Warcraft 3, and he has Roar as well. I'd make the bear form either resistant or armored, and I would make it an AoE striker. It'd be similar to the stats of a fire elemental in its bear form, except it would not be doing elemental damage. It would be doing physical damage, and it would probably be I'd probably actually say it'd be resistant, because druids come off more resistant than armored to me, which would be interesting, but that would make it too much like the fire elemental, so you might want to go, you know, armored. I'm not sure how they would handle that. That would be up to the developers to decide what they think is best, but I would give it passively either resistant or armored, and make it an AoE physical swiper. And you could kind of power scale it around the fire elemental. The fire elemental does a full, like, 360 all around its body swipe. I would say the bear form would do more of an arc only in front, so it would hit like half of its body instead of the whole area. So you could actually power scale it around that, make it maybe a little bit more tanky than the fire elemental, and a little bit more damage, just because the damage won't hit everything around it. I think that would be nifty for the tank bear form version, and it would give you like a nice solid cheaper tank for Cenarions that would actually be helpful. And then when you don't have tank form, you would have like a beefy attacker that can only maybe in his normal form hit single targets, but he also would have rejuvenation. How you would balance rejuvenation, they would have to think about that too. But I think a cool trait for rejuvenation, because this is something I've thought about, would be able to be, when you rejuvenate a target, it gives it resistance, or it gives it armored for a short period of time. I think that would be a nifty ability for the Druid of the Claw to have. You could pair that with like Bog Beast. It would be similar to the Shaman's armored, but it wouldn't be permanent. It would only be up every time he casts rejuvenation, and you would probably have one or two rejuves up. Like when one rejuve ends, another one would go up. Again, power scaling rejuvenation would probably have to be a little bit stronger than the Shaman's heal, because it would be a single target over time. You'd probably have to do anywhere from 4 to 6 seconds. The minis in this game tend to die pretty quick, so you'd have to be able to balance around that as well. Anyways, I just wanted to share this because I can't fathom that they're not going to use the Druid of the Talon and the Druid of the Claw. They're essentially already in the game. They would just have to, make the art a little bit different, probably, to make sure the bosses keep their unique model. But I think that the best thing they can do is go this route, and I think it would greatly help the Cenarion faction. I know a lot of people don't like the alternates. I think these two should be probably the last two alternating minis. But I think if you make them good enough, you got to think of each form as an individual unit. I think what they've been doing with the alternating minis is they're kind of not looking at. They both need to be useful in a similar way. You can't have like a mini that does a ton of damage and then entangles, because the effect, it's very weird, and you need to be able to drop it at a certain point in certain decks, and you need certain spells. I don't think the idea of the alternations are bad. I think it just requires better alternations, and I think it requires more alternations in a deck so you can actually change out your minis as you play. I would also recommend that when you alternate forms, the cost remains the same. Like the Druid of the Claw in the Druid normal form should be 4 cost, whereas the Bear should be 4 cost as well. I think changing the gold cost as you alternate is just an extra step that you don't need to really do. I think changing the forms is more than good enough. Anyways, these are my thoughts. I hope Blizzard checks this out. I'm not a big time YouTuber, like I'm huge, where I can post this and it's going to be all seen and everything. So if you guys like it, subscribe, get it out there so that maybe Blizzard can take a look at this. But this is an idea. I think the best way to fix alternates is to make them around the same cost going forward, and making them have a good trait and ability in each form that you can play, so you can kind of pick ahead of time, or giving them kind of like a middle of the ground trait that helps both forms but isn't gonna make them overly strong. Like if you want to specialize, you can specialize that mini. Anyways, tell me what you guys think in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys think traits which should be. Like if you guys want to type them down in the comments, like this could be a trait for the Druid of the Talon, this could be trait for the Druid of the Claw. You can do bear form, normal forms, whatever. I'd love to hear it. I'm very interested, and I'm almost guaranteeing that these two are eventually coming. Alright, guys, have a great day. See you in the next video.